Chapter 5. I am assessed. I made it back to Q building on time and bursting with health, which seemed to surprise Moose. The inevitable followed. For 1 hour I discussed my trip through the parachute school, the account being one in which the fact quotient was in inverse ratio to the difficulty of the feats of daring do all allegedly performed. The good captain promptly counterpunched with a version of how he had gone through the same course a month or so earlier when it was really tough. Once again, truth was crushed to earth. After we ran out of heroic lies, Moose brought me up to date. I've managed to swing a deal with Cozy Carl Hoff. He's the acting branch chief over in Special Operations. They'll carry you on their roster for the time being. No more OG, not unless you want to be a professor, and incidentally, the word's around that you are impolite to chief instructors. Take my advice and change branches. What Special Operations do? Pretty much the same thing as the OGs, only you do it on your own. You might get a radio operator if you needed one, otherwise it's you and the resistance groups. All sounds very interesting. I quit. Another thing, Cozy Carl wants you to get an S report. Bring back a good one and you'll be permanently assigned to SO. Again, Moose filled in the gaps. The OSS had gotten around to setting up an assessment school, which was called Area S for no particular reason, unless it was because there are 4 S's in assess. You went there, stayed 3 days, took all manner of tests, physical, mental, and moral, then the school powers made out your S report and sent it back to Washington. An S report was terribly top secret. It had what was wrong with you and what was right, whether or not you should be kept in the OSS, whether or not you should be sent overseas, and if so, what duty you should perform once you got there. Headquarters placed what bordered on blind faith in their reports. Once the area got underway, it was virtually impossible to be sent overseas without a favorable nod from S. This was frequently offered as an explanation for the quality of the personnel on duty in Washington. By the time they got around to saying me, I had been in the Cloak and Dagger business a mere 7 months and had seen plenty of Dagger, mostly rubber, but not much Cloak. Now it started. Everything about Area S was very sneaky, even going down there. First, I was called into my branch office and given a numbing security lecture. Then, after I seemed properly convinced that the whole thing was a big secret, they gave me a phony name, any name. I could pick it, but it had to be acceptable to them. I knew they wouldn't let me go in as Student Michaels is a horse's ass, no matter how hard I leaned on my Mohawk Indian ancestry. So I borrowed the nickname of the late Cobber Kane, an Australian pilot who had been top ace in the RAF deck at the time of his death, and went into the record books as Student Cobber. I was told to report at 8 in the morning, complete with toilet articles and a clear mind. I would then change into fatigue clothes. The rest of the class going down to be assessed would do the same. We'd all pile into a truck and it would take us to the area. The idea of changing into fatigues was to destroy what was left of your identity. Your name was gone. If you had a uniform and rank or grade, they went too. If you were a civilian, no one could tell by looking. The clothing change was made in strict privacy. Your classmates didn't see you until after the switch. The most important link in the no identity chain was known as a cover story. That being any plausible tale except the truth about who, what, how, why, and why you were there. The prime object at most OSS schools and areas catering to special bodies was to break the other fellow's cover. I thought a small head start in that direction might not be a bad idea, so I arrived in front of the designated building early and sat on a bench across the street, trying to figure out who were going to be my school chums. Most of them were agonizingly casual about things and consequently easy to spot. I went in to report, got shuffled around through a maze of corridors which would have disturbed a case-hardened Harvard rat, and ended up in a dressing booth with an armful of fatigue clothes. I climbed into them, handed my beloved boots and uniform and university ring to a corporal who was to be their guardian, and went out to meet the others. They were a nondescript crew at best, and the fatigues didn't help. I had a feeling the OSS wasn't going to hatch many hitters out of this clutch of eggs. There were 19 all told in a complete assortment of ages, shapes, and sizes. It took an uncomfortable hour in the back of a truck to get to Area S, but the ride was forgotten as soon as we saw the place. It gave every evidence of having been a gentleman farmer's estate, and whoever he was, he knew how to live. We pulled up in front of the mansion, jumped out, and were immediately set upon by several large dogs. The brutes were being playful and probably didn't know they could maim by sheer impact. Some of our less intrepid members climbed right back in the truck. I stood my ground, flanked by two new friends, a student Brucephalus and a student Hercules. Behind the dogs came what we assumed to be the staff. They turned out to be professors, doctors, assistants, psychologists, psychiatrists, and representatives of various allied arts. Their mission was to examine and test us in every way known to man. We were all impressed by their appearance. I had never seen so much radiant good cheer. Brucephalus took one look and muttered, "Oh my God, the happiness boys." The name stuck. Whatever they did to us, the boys did all they could for us. We were dragged inside by the Beamish ones, shown to our quarters, given a rough idea of what to expect in the next 3 days, and turned loose for an hour. Hercules and Brucephalus started bickering good-naturedly. "Look, I don't want to break your cover, which would be simple enough to do because you're so dumb, but I might find out you're in our army, and that would destroy my morale. I'd like to know one thing. Where did you get the silly name? And you call me dumb, Cobber?" Tell who Brucephalus was. Well, here goes my cover. Brucephalus was the horse ridden by my former commanding officer, Alexander the Great. "Right, Hercules. I think we'll change your name. Herky Jerky. No, Jerk. No, Stupid. That's it. Student Stupid. Perfect." He rushed off to notify the staff. Next order of business was a meeting at which the class formally met the staff and each other. As this began, 4 young ladies entered the room. One of them, a redhead, was a real looker, and we were delighted to learn they were also in the class, having been brought down in a separate car. Some wise soul knew it wouldn't have been fair to throw them in the back of that truck. Our trio staked a claim on the redhead, labeled her Flame, and snarled at anyone who came near. We never really had a chance, though. The girls were only around for 24 hours. Then it hit us. We were tested morning, noon, afternoon, and most of the night. Every conceivable way. Oral, written, drawn, checked, guessed, and figured. We filled in blanks, picked numbers, chose pictures, pulled levers, pushed buttons, and wrote page after page. We did real problems in the field, and we did imaginary problems in the house. We played cops and robbers, cowboys and Indians, and Pussy Wants a Corner. We hunted and hunted. We ran a treasure hunt around an obstacle hunt around the clock. We were given 5 minutes to search an innocuous-looking room and 10 minutes to write a detailed description of its recent occupant. Brucephalus found a blonde wig and a hollow needle, and promptly pegged the inhabitant as a transitive junkie. All the tests were individual affairs. What you did at S, you did strictly on your own hook. One little dandy, unofficially called the temper tester, involved building a wooden cage big enough to hold a man. The instructor gave you the plans, a collection of blocks and rods, which assembled an oversized Tinker toy set, and 2 assistants. The catch was that the assistants weren't there to assist, anything but. You didn't know it, and the instructor sat in the corner, noting how you reacted. Given orders to the helpers did less than no good. All they had in mind was keeping you from putting the cage together. They were subtle, and many a student blew his bonnet before the allotted 15 minutes passed. Things reached the physical violence stage frequently. The instructor was supposed to step in and prevent that, but one particularly short-tempered individual flattened all 3 plotters before an explanation was possible. In spite of bribes, soft soap, appeals to reason, attempted beatings, horrible threats, and every other trick the students could conjure up, the cage was never completely assembled, least of all by me. After watching those 2 kick my work apart once and fall through it the next time, I realized I was being had, gave up quietly, and spent the remaining time trying to interest the unholy 3 in a black market whiskey buying deal I dreamed up on the spot. The roughest test came late the second night, when everyone was dead tired, and as always, we took it one by one. The hypothetical situation was that you had been nabbed while going through top-secret files in the War Department. Caught so red-handed, a real alibi was out of the question. The police had brought you before a 3-man investigation board. You were told all this precisely 3 minutes before going into the interrogation room. You were also told your final S report rating depended on whether or not you could talk your way out of it. You hardly had time to think before an instructor said, "All right, they're ready for you. Remember, you can't feign amnesia or insanity, and you can't refuse to talk. Don't try to be cute. Everything depends on how you made out in there. Good luck." I tried being stupid, which was exactly how I felt, and it didn't even come close to working. They tore my story apart in a matter of minutes, and were plenty tough about it in the process. Students often broke down completely under the verbal beating these three handed out. They belted me with, "You didn't blunder into the wrong office, Mr. Cobber. You blundered into the wrong organization. We can't use you in the OSS." I was sent into another room and left alone to wonder how I was going to explain things to my father and Moose and Eric. All I could hope was that Camp Ploush had sunk back into the swamp, or that maybe I could go back to Fort Benning and get in an airborne outfit. In came another instructor, one of my favorites. "Hello, Cobber. How'd you make out?" "I blew it." "Ah, I'm sorry to hear that. And you were doing so well, too." "Cigarette? Thanks. What happens now?" "Well, I'm afraid they'll send you back to Washington, then to an officer's replacement depot." "Jesus, I could do without that." "Maybe you can get sent back to your old outfit." "I could do without that, too." "Maybe they'll give you some leave. At least you'll get a delay en route. So you'll see your family." "What'll I tell them? What'll I tell my friends? That I'm too goddamn stupid to make it in the OSS? I know branch chiefs who can't compute simple interest, and I get bounced. It's rough, I know. Wish I could help you, but you'll get along all right. This war can't last forever. When it's over, we'll all pick up where we left off. I can get my master's. What'll you do? Go back to college? I hope I live to see the day. You will. Where'd you go? University of..." And right there, something clicked. This nice man was asking too many questions. It was only by the grace of God I hadn't blurted out that my old outfit was in Louisiana, my family was in Annapolis, and I'd gone to the University of Virginia. Any of those answers would have busted my cover story to bits. Maybe I was on my way out of the OSS, but I hadn't seen the orders yet. I looked to my favorite instructor and smiled. "I'm from the 7th Division. My family lives in New York. I went to the University of North Carolina." What are you selling, smooth boy?" "Nothing, Cobber." He sounded hurt. "I thought maybe you'd feel better if we talked." "I'll feel better if you're a little less inquisitive." "Nice work, Cobber. Nice work." He sounded quite pleased now. "I didn't think we'd trip you. Not with that suspicious nature of yours." "Meaning?" "It's a sweetness and light routine. We want to find out how a student reacts when the tension eases. Whether you talk too much when you relax, most of all, whether you maintain your cover. And those 3 bastards who wrecked me, just softening you up for me. You're despicable." We were both smiling now. "Part of my charm. What if I'd spilled my guts? It doesn't make much difference if the rest of the work has been satisfactory. We're not trying to crucify anyone, just make sure they don't do it again. You'll never know how close you came to knocking me over. Coming close doesn't count in this business. Time for me to take on the next one. See you tomorrow." I started out of the room, and he spoke again. "University of North Carolina, huh?" "Yes." "Funny, I went to law school at the University of Virginia. Could have sworn I saw you down there. That test drove home the fact that you had to stay ready all day, every day. The staff and your classmates weren't always trying to break through your precious cover, and any time you got a pat on the back, someone was just feeling for a soft spot to slip in a big, long stabber. This sort of thing went on all the time. The strain was hardly unbearable, but we felt it. Most of the students felt it more than my 2 friends and I. We managed to bend a part of each day's agenda slightly out of shape. Not that we let our irreverence get out of hand. We all knew the value of a good S report. The 3 days we were on trial included 2 hours with a psychiatrist. This was the only time we were under orders to tell the truth. Our stories being strictly between ourselves and the doc. He used it to make up his little part of the overall stew from which the final report was prepared. Only I drew a lady wig picker, 40-ish attractive, with what I took to be a Viennese accent, and extremely sharp. We got along famously together. I was so delighted to be able to tell the whole truth again, it became practically alien to me by then, that I rattled along for 115 minutes. By the end of the third day, the staff knew all they wanted to know, which was fortunate, since the class was ore-eyed from all the tests. So they wound things up with the party. Hercules and I were playing a delightful parlor game, which involved knocking a small wooden ball into a cage with a series of paddles fastened on twirling sticks. We'd been playing every spare minute we could find, and this was a championship match. Bucephalus insisted on being the referee, a job he fulfilled with stupefying incompetence, all the while reminding us, "I can be bought." In the midst of a furious exchange, we heard glasses tinkling and bottles banging. The staff paraded into the recreation room bearing booze, ice, and glasses. While Hercules stood there stunned, I slammed home the winning shot and headed for where I thought they'd set up the bar, his howls of protest ringing in my ears. "This is a farewell party given by the staff for the class," said one of the instructors. "How very nice," said I, grabbing a fifth of scotch. We settled down. The director made a brief and charming speech telling us we had been an excellent group, and we'd done well, and we'd earned a little relaxation, so go to it. We went, and in less than an hour, a goodly number of my comrades fell slightly drunk. The staff was lapping it up with us and chatting merrily with one another. Then one of the instructors casually asked, "What do you think we should do with the hardcore Nazis after the war?" This started a general discussion, with the staff leading the way. Then members of the class arose, most of them swaying a bit, and delivered themselves of various opinions. Arguments started, theories were expounded. My friends and I were off in a corner listening to the alcoholic chatter and keeping quiet for a change. It must have dawned on all three of us at the same time. I nudged Bucephalus. "This whole deal is as queer as a Chinese flag. Most of the class is fractured, but every man on the staff is cold sober. It's a fix." "I was just noticing that. They're all drinking out of the same bottles, too. Must be tea. Why, those foxy bastards," he said admiringly. "This is no party. It's as much a test as anything else has been." "I've been waiting for you guys to realize it," said Hercules. "They want to know how we handle ourselves after gazing upon the wine while it is red." "Then you'd better hurry up and get loaded," I told him. "You're a total failure this way." The "what do you do with the hardcore Nazis" debate was in high gear now. Some of the talk was intelligent, some was largely unintelligible. Some showed the liquor had dulled the speaker's mind to the point where he was likely to say anything. I counted 7 cover stories which were blown sky high. The staff took it all in. They also noted the way we were staying out of things, which was highly unusual. One of them asked, "How do you feel about this, Hercules?" Our boy hauled himself erect, but before he could answer, Bucephalus muttered, "Now for Christ's sake, don't embarrass us by admitting you don't know what hardcore means." Hercules went right back down roaring. Before they could come after us again, a student leaped to his feet, shouting, "Castrate 'em all in the morning." He then fell flat on the floor, evidently gathering strength for his last address. While they were lifting him into a chair, Hercules giggled. "I don't want to talk about large-bore Nazis. Let's sing." This seemed a splendid idea, so we launched into "Onward, Christian Soldiers," substituting freely in the lyrics conscript for Christian, being particularly well received. The director made a final direct plea. "Aren't you fellows going to enter into this discussion at all?" Hercules finished that angle forever by insisting on absolute quiet while he sang something he devoutly described as "my mother's favorite hymn." "I am Jesus' little lamb. He has made me what I am. He will wash me white as snow. What a dirty little job for Jesus." Everyone collapsed and the staff gave up. The happiness boys had evidently ascertained the liquor reaction of everyone but us, and since ours was apparently not to be had, they broke down and got blind for real. Later, much later, we adopted the director, who finally had to be led upstairs, happily singing our newest song, "Oh God bless you and keep you, Marta McCree." We tried the paddle game once more, but the contest ended abruptly when the referee fell through the table. It was obviously time for bed, so we ricocheted upstairs to our room, with Hercules bringing along 3 empty bottles under the mistaken notion that they were dear friends who had gone on to bliss eternal, and I was with them when they died, he announced reverently. Next day, those of the staff who could navigate came out to wish us Godspeed. We caught a brief glimpse of the director waving feebly from an upstairs window, and Hercules asked, "Was he that color last night?" After a trip to headquarters, we reclaimed our clothes and identity in the same sneaky way we'd given them up, and were turned loose. My friends and I met around the corner. Bucephalus turned out to be a lieutenant colonel in the field artillery. Hercules, a lieutenant colonel in the engineers. Both wore parachute wings. Their mutual dismay when each saw the other's silver oak leaves seemed to make them overlook my lowly status. They had orders to leave for another area immediately, so I saw them off. As their staff car drove away, they were still at it. The last words I heard were, "Wait a minute, Colonel. What's your data rank?" One thing I knew, my S report was back in Washington by now, and I wouldn't have long to wonder. Moose was at his desk when I walked in. "Welcome home. How'd it go?" "All right, I think. Any official verdict yet?" "I'll go down and ask the Colonel. Wait here." He wasn't gone long, and when he ambled back, the one look was enough. "Nice work. Your report was excellent. Now what? You can practically call your own shot. You're a qualified parachutist. You've had a good hunk of OSS training, and your S report fairly glistens. You can probably stay in special operations or go into either secret intelligence or marine intelligence. I wonder what Crazy Carl thinks about this. I'll give him a ring. Wait in the other office a second." He came out 5 minutes later with a hard look on his face and said, "Lieutenant Colonel Hoff saw your S report before anyone else did. Orders have already been cut assigning you to SO on a permanent status. Now you know why they call him Crazy Carl. He bets on races after they're run. It doesn't bother me, though. I was now the property of special operations, and they had a reputation of being good to the help. I was tabbed for overseas duty as soon as a slot opened up in the European theater. Until then, I was given permission to live in Washington if I so desired. I did. To top it all, Eric the Great came barreling back from Camp Hale. He admitted his most outstanding bit of instructing was to be the best-looking WAC on the post out for a ski lesson and break her leg. Lovely girl, he said, but a bit clumsy.